Phoenix, Fox and Simon Kinberg's second attempt at adapting the Phoenix Dark Phoenix saga, and it is mildly better than the first attempt, mainly because they actually dedicated a full film to telling the story, but it is still a massive disappointment that does not do the source material any justice. This is another film with a deeply troubled pre-production, production, and post-production on virtually every single level. And this goes back to its origins.
It was a hard movie because in its initial concept, when I wrote it, to begin with, it was meant to be a two-part film. And then it suddenly became a one-part movie for reasons that weren't of my doing.
Kinberg knew that to properly adapt the Phoenix storyline, you needed more than one film, but that idea was shrunk by the studio, and then there was all sorts of changes in what villains would be involved.
Was there anything from the comics that you would have liked to include but just couldn't for any reason?
Well, I think if I had like 4 hours to tell this story, I would have included the Hellfire Club. I might have included Lalandra.
What would be the identity of the shape-shifting aliens in the film? It was being adjusted constantly. They shot the film initially, and both due to poor test screenings, as well as similarities to Civil War, as well as Captain Marvel, they kept changing more and more things about the film, doing multiple rounds of reshoots.
It was 2.5 weeks of first unit photography. Mostly we focused on the third act, both emotionally and in terms of the physical scale and the action of the third act. We adjusted.
Changing the entire third act.
I think my character changed a lot in the third act. Are we allowed to talk about this? I don't know.
I can't even remember really what the original third act was.
I know it was like motion capture for me, right?
You were like in your original form.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden I was like, no, we want you to stay in the Chastain form. So I came back and...
It's more aesthetically pleasing, I think.
Darling.
Cutting entire action sequences.
There's a whole sequence from the UN. We shot that sequence like 2 or 3 times, and then it was cut out.
So much so that Jessica Chastain openly stated she did not know her character's name until she watched the final film.
You know, studio was bought at a certain point. I didn't even know what my character's name was until I saw the film.
What? And adding one final piece to it, this movie was being made while the Fox Disney acquisition was taking place. So people knew they were going to lose their jobs. The higher ups knew that whatever they did didn't really matter because it was going to be the Disney executives' problem or successes down the line. And so there's just kind of this defeated attitude throughout the entire final stretch of finishing up this film. So unfortunately, the movie that essentially closed out this era of X-Men films turned out to be a very disappointing movie that didn't live up to anyone's expectations. On the positive side, Michael Fassbender is fantastic in all of these movies and just brings a weight to everything that he does. The final train battle, which was done in reshoots, is surprisingly effective considering it was a last-minute addition to the film. There's some great moments in there, but most of the movie just kind of falls flat. Characters feel out of character. The drama between Xavier and Beast just feels overcooked for most of it. The other major problem is that the villains are unbelievably bland. Actually, entirely believably bland because they kept rewriting and changing the script. They were supposed to be Skrull, but then Captain Marvel used the Skrull, so they decided they needed to change that, and so they kept, in the writing process, in the reshoots, in the editing, fiddling away all the specificity of the villains, so you're just left with Jessica Chastain is an evil villain wandering around throughout the movie, in a movie that's supposed to be about Dark Phoenix. As I mentioned, there are some nice moments. It is one of the more focused X-Men movies. For that reason, I think it's more watchable than the bottom 3. But as a movie that's telling this iconic storyline, closing out a 20-year run of X-Men films, still a massive disappointment.